Hello, welcome to Testimony Tuesday. Thank you for following. I just can thank you in advance for liking this and for sharing this, because I know you will. Hey, I have someone with me today that you not probably many of you are following right now know this guy. I've met you once before, I think, and but this is Doug Weber. And Doug has an amazing story about what Jesus has done in his life through Celebrate Recovery. And so, Doug, thank you. Boy, you've been down a road and you have traveled a journey. And man, God has taken care of you, my brother.
Absolutely.
And we're thankful for that. And you're telling the story. You're telling the story every chance you get. And Dougie Boggs, that's the only fault I got to this guy. He is an associate of Dougie Boggs. He is an acquaintance of Dougie Boggs. We called Dougie Boggs the devil chaser. That's what we call him. So he is something else. Yeah, he is something else. But Doug's going to share with us his story and just what God has been doing. And please, please, please listen up and share this, because there is a huge mass of people who need to hear this guy's story. So, hey, Doug, where I met you was here at BFCOG at Celebrate Recovery on Thursday night.
Life recovery.
Life Recovery. Yeah, Life Recovery on Thursday night.
Thursday night, 6:30.
6:30. And you all are still meeting here, aren't
Absolutely,
you?
yes.
Okay. But hey, tell us your story, Doug.
Okay, yeah. Real quick, I'm a recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is November 27th of 2018.
Okay.
And as Gary mentioned, yeah, it was. I've got a couple of different journeys. I had the journey before and all that darkness and all the addiction. But today I celebrate life and life recovery and helping others.
Yeah.
A little bit about my background. I try not to stay there too long. Growing up, I had a pretty good upbringing. I had a loving mother and father, a brother and 3 sisters. My dad was an alcoholic, and so I grew up in an alcoholic home. And that was, looking back on it, was one of the first things that I saw, growing up. My dad was like the Dr. and Jekyll type of alcoholic, most loving guy that you'd want to meet, and then the whole house come crumbling down around that, So I saw those things, and that was one thing that I do recognize about that. I remember after a horrible night that I pledged to my mom that, I'll never be like that.
Yeah.
I was just a little ornery kid that loved to play ball and sports, and that's, I wanted to make a career out of that, But lo and behold, come about the age of 13, 14 years old, actually it was before that. I can remember taking a couple of beers out of our refrigerator when we lived out in the country, taking them out into the woods. And I got for the first time the effect that gave me, that magic, and it was out, from all the childhood memories and everything that was associated with life at that point. It was like, wow, this is it, and it was like, it's, why didn't I bring more of this stuff out here? And when can I do it again? And it was just an escape. And wow. From that point, I can look back and it controlled me from that moment forward. If that gives you any kind of an idea what runs through an alcoholic's mind, or an addict's mind. And it's played a big role in it. And from that point forward, you would find, Doug, I knew where all the beer was hidden. I knew where the neighbor's beer was at, all these people, and I was in it, But it did. It really, looking back on it, it really controlled me. It took, from that point forward, at the age of 13, 14, it was the Friday night drinking. Not long after that, I was introduced to marijuana, weed, and by the time I was in my freshman year in high school, I was smoking weed every day and drinking on the weekends.
Wow.
And it just, and it took off from there, It's progressive. By the time I graduated high school, I was drinking and smoking every day, including, I was mixing in other drugs with that. I was like a guinea pig when it came to drugs. I didn't know what they would do, but here, give it to me, I'll try it.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I can't say that I never had fun with it, because I did. There was a lot of fun in it, but it was, looking back on it, it was just it was a big escape. I drank and used drugs to escape life and its troubles and its problems. Like I said, I did have fun. But one thing I failed to see, it was controlling me. I mean, the first time I can look back in my addiction and my alcoholism, and the coincidences and the legal problems started at an early age, 18 years old, and they just stockpiled. It went from a criminal mischief to much more, and they just stockpiled. And as those happened, my progression using drugs and alcohol, it became a daily thing. I'm gonna fast forward quite a bit.
Yeah.
I went through all of that. It was just I went through 3 failed marriages because of alcoholism. I went through, like I said, alluded to earlier, countless. I never spent more than 3 days in jail, but I was there a lot. It seemed like my first career in the military was cut short because of alcoholism. I was court ordered to go to my first outpatient treatment in the military when I was 20 years old, and I went to that outpatient treatment center, and it was twice a week, and I went there and they did all the intake paperwork. I came back the next session, and my counselor told me that I was an alcoholic at 20 years old, and I wanted to slap her, and it was like, I know what an alcoholic was. I grew up with an alcoholic.
Sure.
My dad was an alcoholic, and I'm not an alcoholic. And that's that denial, and I was just not there yet.
Yeah.
I hadn't arrived, or I haven't gotten there yet, and that journey would take me there.
Yeah.
So that's the path that I was on, and like I said, I went through 3 failed marriages, and the alcohol just took control. Probably 8 or 9 treatment centers, counting all of them up. There was one point, I like to mention this, that when I was about 29 years old, I was my 4th treatment center, to where I had finally come to the realization I was an alcoholic and I needed help. And I checked myself back into Riverside Hospital and stayed there for 30 days again, and came out. And I said, I got to get a sponsor. I got to work this step. I got to get sober. And, through those steps, I was able to stay and working, doing meetings, having a sponsor, working the 12 steps in a program of Alcoholics Anonymous, attending AA meetings. I was able to stay sober for 4 years.
Okay.
I was doing a deal, man. I got involved with my church. I was teaching Sunday school classes. I was really involved. My life, my marriage came back together.
Yeah.
And all of us, I just walked away from it. I stopped. I am a firm believer. If you go to a life recovery meeting with me, Doug's going to tell you that you have to do this stuff daily.
Okay.
You have to do this stuff daily. I was told by a sponsor of mine, still today, who is my sponsor 25 years later. He's my same sponsor today.
Wow.
That's how God works.
Yes,
in our lives.
Yeah.
And 25 later, I can remember this last time. It was December in 2018, standing in the parking lot with him over in Dublin Springs, a treatment facility. I went to a meeting. I had tracked this guy down. I ran him down, because I needed help.
Yeah.
And I remember standing in that parking lot that night, and he goes, Doug, we're going to work. He goes, I'll work with you. And he goes, one thing I want you to do is, you go home tonight, you get on your knees and you thank God for your day of sobriety.
Yeah.
And he goes, you get up tomorrow morning and you ask him
for
another day.
Wow.
One day at a time.
Man.
And that just set off a chain of events. The 25 years, in 1991, I relapsed after 4 years of doing the deal, staying sober, doing all these things and the things that I needed to stay sober day at a time. I walked away from that. It was walking away from my morning prayer. It was walking away from my daily devotions. It was walking away from sponsorship. And it was walking, pretty soon, Doug started to take control again,
Yep.
and that's not, left to my own devices, it's chaotic.
Wow.
It's not very good.
That's true.
So it took me 25 years to get back. I walked away from that pretty soon. The thought came that maybe I can drink again. Maybe I can do this thing again.
Yeah.
And the ego and the pride and they talk about it in addiction and in recovery, that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our problems.
You hear this?
You know,
Oh,
and
man.
yeah, and when I started to take control again, like I said, it's just the whole world became chaotic. In the mind of this guy that was in his thinking, they said when I came to the room, they said you got to get rid of that stinking thinking.
Okay,
You know,
yeah.
that stinking thinking. You
Yeah.
know, it
There you
kind of
go.
relates back to Romans 12 too, right?
There you go.
Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Amen.
You know, and man, that's so powerful.
Yes, it
And it's
is.
so true.
Yeah.
You know, and I practice that today too. I love that. But yeah, I kind of forget where I was at. After that relapse, and it was like, I set out, it was kind of like a mission to prove that I could do this thing on my own.
Okay.
And it was like, you know, I ditched the God thing, I ditched the program thing, I ditched the recovery thing. And it's like, I'm going to be someday, some way, I'm going to be able to beat this thing and control it. And right there, folks, that's a certificate or a prescription to die, you know?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and my friend Dougie Boggs, I love the guy,
Yeah.
you know, and he can
Yeah.
verify and vouch to that too. I love
Mhm.
him. But you know, it was just I fought it, and I fought it, and I fought it, and I fought it. You know, there's where the 3 marriages went. There's where all the consequences went. And it was just, it got down to the point, and we talked about this last night in one of my meetings. Thank God I was brought to a gift of desperation. You know, I at the end, you know, I spent 4 years taking, I had 4 major surgeries, and in that 4 years, I did bottle after bottle of the pain pills, along with probably, you know, just so much. It was so much alcohol involved. It's just I don't even want to talk about it.
Sure.
But you know, it came to the point. Now I can remember at times in my isolation the last couple of years of my alcoholism and my addiction that if I would look out the window and I would say, man, if I could just get sober, if I could just get into those rooms, man, I could make a difference.
Yeah.
You know, but that's the you know, that's the power of that, you know, alcoholism and what it does. But I was given the gift of desperation. I remember one day, just like every other day, I would walk in from the liquor store, I'd set my booze on the bar, and I remember looking up, and in my frustration, we call it the bewilderments, you know, the frustration, the despair, the you know, the horror, you know, of this, and I looked up and I didn't say, I just said, why don't you just get this over with, you know? And I kind of, it was like a 95% kind of thing, you know? And I came back and it wasn't long after that. And I said, you know what? I didn't really mean that. I need some help, you know? And that was just, it was in my heart. I didn't verbally say it, but it was in my heart. It's like, man, if I don't do something about this right now, I'm going to die, you know?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't long after that, a series of things got God working again in my life. Thanksgiving, I got sober on Thanksgiving weekend.
Okay.
You know
in
what?
2018.
In 2018.
All right. Okay.
You know, it was my mom and my sister was the only ones that was checking. They would check on me doing these welfare checks, so to speak. And I had told my mom, I said, Mom, I'm going to get involved in AA. I told her that like a year before this, you know. And every time she'd call, she goes, "You've been to them AA meetings yet?" And I said, "No, I'm going to go next Monday," you know. And kept putting it off. I kept putting it off. And that's what we do, you know. That's what I did.
Yeah.
And she would call, but my sister, I remember my sister calling and we got through the small talk and I can remember vividly like it was yesterday. She goes, "Well, the reason I'm calling, I said, what other reason could there be? You know, and it's like, well, Betsy, my other sister's having Thanksgiving at her house and we just want to let you know, wanted to invite you."
Okay.
And, you know, it's kind of like, it was like a bright spot in my darkness, you know. It was like, wow, you know, that'd be cool. That'd be nice, you know.
Yeah.
And so I got kind of excited about it. I said, "Yeah, I'll pick up Mom on the way out." And I got off the phone and I said, "You're an idiot." That's how I talked to myself. And I said, "How in the world, in your condition, in your state, could you do that? How could you spend an hour with your family?" And man, that just started working on me. It started working on me. It was 2 weeks until this event.
Yeah.
And so what's an alcoholic do? I drank it. I just drank it away. You know, I was like, well, I drank it away and I wouldn't think about it. But it was eating at me. It's like, how in the world that you got to this point to where you can't spend 15 minutes on a Thanksgiving with your family?
Wow.
You know, and I'm going, wow. And it was disturbing. And I said, man, God, Doug, you got to do something about your drink. You got to do something. You got to do something about it soon. You're going to die. And it was the day that we were supposed to meet for this dinner, and I couldn't do it. I could not do it. And I remember staying up most of that night and thinking, how can I do this?
Yeah.
And it was God was saying, you got to get sober, man. Come, you know. Anyhow, I called my sister early enough in the morning where she wouldn't answer the phone, but she did. You know, it's one of those things, you know.
You're going to leave a voice.
I was going to leave a text message. She said hello. And you know what? Here's where it started, you know. It was like the truth came out of my mouth.
Wow.
I said, I'm sick and I can't make it.
Yeah.
I'm sick and I can't make it.
Wow. Yeah.
I got off the phone and I said, Doug, you got to do something about this.
Yeah.
And I can remember just laying there long enough in bed, and it's like, you know what, I'm going to drink over this one, and I'm going to think about it another day. You know, and that's what I did, you know, and it was, I went with the thought, you know, that if I make it through this next day, I'm going to get sober. I woke up on a Sunday morning, and I said, I got to do something about this. And I didn't know. I've been through all those treatment centers. I've been to the ERs. I don't know how many times. Those people didn't like me anymore down there because I cussed them out every time I went there. And you know, and it was just, that's who I was.
Sure.
You know, and I said, what do I do? And so I said, well, I'll try to wean off of this. I'll taper off of this stuff. So that's what I tried to do. So Sunday I was trying to taper off of it. I did pretty well. I had a couple of cans, 24-ounce cans of beverage. And I was more scared of going through the withdrawal and detox because all that time I knew I was going to have repercussions, and there was going to be a penalty to pay with that. I didn't know if I would live through it, to be honest with you. And so I was really afraid of going through that. So I tapered off a couple of days. I drank, I think, the equivalent of a 6-pack that day. The next day came, and it was like, well, you know, just do 2 today. Let's just do 2 today. So we got to 2, and it was like, oh man, I need another one. And so I got in the car and I was headed to the drive-thru to get another one, and I pulled out of my parking spot. I drove about, I don't know, 20 feet, 30 feet, and my foot just hit the brakes. And God said, stop.
Wow. Wow.
You know, and it just all started. It was overwhelming. It was an overwhelming experience.
And so you didn't go on to the drive?
I didn't go through. I pulled back, and at that moment, you know, I started crying like a baby.
Yeah.
And and there was so many emotions that were going on at that point in time. It's like, it's over.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm crying like a baby at this time.
Oh,
you know, I got the
sure,
snot cry. I got all this stuff going on, and I get up to my apartment and I fall, you know, in a fetal position, and I said, God, I don't know what to do. Help me.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. Help me.
Wow.
I had a good idea of what needed to be done. I needed to get back in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah. And so I said, God, you know, you get me through detox, you get me through this withdrawal, you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
So after about 8 or 9 days in bed and through a horrible detox, you know, and God just pulled me through that. And, you know, here's how it works. I got out of that 7 or 8 days of withdrawal, and I got up, I took a shower, and I said, you know, I was kind of relieved that I'd made it through that process. And I took a shower and I came out to the bar where I usually set my booze out every morning. And within an arm's reach, there was a meeting guide for all the meetings, AA meetings lists and locally. And I had gotten that through a person about 5 months before my sober day. So I used that list and I went to my first AA meeting. And, you know, it's just, I had to get right with God.
Sure.
You know, I hadn't done that yet, you know, and I was afraid because all those 25 years during my relapse to getting sober again, you know, I went through a period of time. I was mad at God. I was angry at God. I cussed God. I blamed God.
Wow.
And it was like I had distanced myself so far away. So I was like this guy that was like, you know, and God said, here I am.
Wow.
I ain't changed a bit.
I ain't here.
I ain't changed it. You did, but I didn't.
Yeah.
You know.
Doug, so here's what I think we should do. I think we should encourage people to go back and listen to this again. I mean, listen to what you've shared, and be sure you share that, and be sure you share this. And then next week, let's pick up and talk about what God did.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and just because, man, you have built, Doug, you have built a fabulous story, and what this is stuff people has got to hear, and so I want to say to you, you have got to hear this again, and you've got to share it. And would you do that? And then next week we're going to pick up, and Doug is going to share about what God has done and through life recovery and a lot of those other things.